Praying in the Midst of Life, led by Ron Delbane, Episcopal priest, leader of workshops and retreats, popular author, spiritual director. He's been teaching people to pray for over 30 years.
Many of us believe that it's up to us to pray in a way that reaches God. I believe we are in the presence of God at all times, and prayer is being attentive to that presence. I remember very clearly that afternoon in 1968 when Sam said to me, "Ron, I really want to pray. But you know, if there were 36 hours in a day, I still wouldn't get done what needs to be done. How do I pray in the midst of all this?" I heard Sam's frustration and his plea, because it had been mine at times in my life. And so I responded, "Sam, let me share something with you that I found helpful in my life. It's a simple little prayer known as the breath prayer." That was the first time I'd ever taught the breath prayer to anyone. That was a long time ago, but people continue to have their version of Sam's words today.
I barely have time to pray during the day. I try to make that an important part of my life, but I just find it very, very difficult even to have time to center in and just have a time to pray and to meditate. And I'm a real big believer that has to be an important part of spiritual growth, but I'm probably the worst offender when it comes to it.
You, like me, probably find yourself living in the busyness of life. For me, a simple way to be attentive to God's presence is the breath prayer. I'd like to share that prayer with you now. The breath prayer takes its name from the Hebrew word ruach, which is translated in three ways: wind, breath, and spirit. It's that ruach, or wind of God, which is hovering over the chaotic waters in creation. It is that breath of God which enters into the first human creature. It is the wind of God that is called forth to raise up the dry bones. And it is the Spirit of God that is breathed into us when Jesus says, "Receive the Holy Spirit." And so the reason it's called the breath prayer is that it's a simple way for us to continually be aware of living in the breath of God, that we have received God's breath from the first moment of creation. Now, the breath prayer is always a prayer of praise and petition. The praise part of the prayer comes from what you normally call God. The greatest praise we can give is that name that we call God. So, what do you call God when you pray? Or what image do you have of God? When you pray, do you pray to God as Lord, or God, Father, Mother, Creator, Shepherd? Is there an image you have of God? Mighty power, Holy One, living water. The second part of the prayer is petition. If God were right in front of you, calling you by name and saying, "What do you want?" what would you say? Now, many times people have trouble here because they're afraid that they're being selfish. For example, you remember the woman who had been bleeding for so many years. As she came up behind Jesus, she said to herself, "If I can just touch the hem of his garment, I'll be healed and I'll be able to start an orphanage to repay God for his mercy to me." Or the man born blind who said, "Lord, that I may see so that I can become a CPA and earn enough money in order to tithe." Well, of course, we know they didn't say those things. They asked for themselves. And so too it is with us. What do you normally call God? And if God were right in front of you, calling you by name and saying, what do you want? What is your deepest yearning? You know, one of the things that a lot of people have found helpful is a simple little thing known as the breath prayer. So, for example, what do you normally call God? Or what image do you have for God?
I usually say Father.
Okay.
You know,
If God, your Father, were right here, saying, Terrence, what do you want? What would you say?
help me to be the model and the image for my family. Help me to lead an example for others that might be watching that I'm not even aware of. Help me to do your will. Help me to be submissive. Help me to say the things and do the things that you would have me say and do.
How would you capture all of that into a simple petition?
Help me, Lord.
Help me, Lord.
Help me.
Okay. What do you normally call God? I mean, you have an image of God, or do you have a name that you normally call God?
I try not to have an image. I just say God.
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 Okay.
Yes.
If God were right here, saying, Pablo, what do you want? What would be your deepest yearning?
Maybe the understanding. I still feel that knowledge and this rationalize of the way we approach situations is with our brain.
Mm-hmm. Well, then it might be, oh God, what? Give me understanding? Help me to understand more. What words would you use to connect understanding and God?
God, give me more understanding.
Okay, one of the things that is also true, especially with people for whom English is not their birth language, it's oftentimes much easier for them to have their breath prayer in their birth language.
Mm-hmm.
What would that be in your birth language? God, give me understanding.
Señor, dame más entendimiento.
Okay. Well, what do you normally call God, or what image of God do you have?
I can tell you that Father, the idea of Father is difficult for me to relate to. I know for those whose fathers are loving and warm and accepting and all that, it's a very easy thing to relate to. I have trouble relating to God as Father. So to me, I guess God doesn't really have a name. I guess Creator is, loving Creator is probably as close as I could come to giving it
Okay.
giving God a name.
If your loving Creator were right here in front of you, saying, Vince, what do you want? What would you say?
I think more than anything else, my deepest yearning has to be for peace of mind and meaning and joy.
Okay.
Now, I don't know how you can put that into one word.
Well, what would it be? Would it be peace of mind? Would it be meaning? Or would it be joy?
I'd have to say peace of mind.
Okay. How would you take the concept peace of mind and loving Creator and turn that into a little simple prayer, 6, 7, 8 syllables?
It would probably be, loving Creator, may I find peace of mind.
Okay. Once you have a breath prayer, how do you use a breath prayer? Well, I usually respond by saying, you just begin to use the breath prayer. You say it. If it's 6, 7, or 8 syllables, then some people find it helpful to emphasize different words in the prayer, such as, Creator, let me see the way. Creator, let me see the way. Creator, let me see the way. And we begin to find the nuances in the different words that we share. But find a time throughout the day when you can remember to use your prayer. It may be something you do every day. Oh, it may be something as simple as brushing your teeth, for example. And that reminds me of a story. Not long ago, I was preaching at a parish and standing in the back as people were leaving. And a woman came up to me and said, I bet you don't remember me. I saw you at a church in Sarasota, Florida. And I said, yes, it was a conference on prayer. And And she said, well, I just wanted to tell you that I bet every day since that conference, and that was, 11, 12 years ago? I've used my breath prayer in the morning when I brush my teeth. Well, we laughed about it, and then I said, do you remember it at other times as well? She said, oh, yes. She said, I guess that was just a way that helped me get used to it. But she said, now it seems to be with me throughout my day at various times. It will just be there, and I'll be aware that I'm using my prayer. So find times in your life when you might want to use the prayer. A doctor friend of mine says she uses it every time she washes her hands. She says, being a dentist, I wash my hands quite a bit. Or you may want to use it every time you hear the phone ring. All it is a way for us to be attentive to the fact that we are in God's presence.
The breath prayer for me has been a way to maintain connection with God. It used to be that I would get so caught up in the busyness of life, and I always had all these things to do. And work keeps me frazzled, as I think most people in our day and age are. And one of the things that I use to remind myself to use the breath prayer is I would take a word from my breath prayer and use it as password to log onto my computer. So numerous times during the day, whenever I log on, there is one particular word, and of course I say my entire breath prayer when I log on, but somehow that one word that's the password seems to kind of focus in, and so for a time I will just concentrate on that one particular word and then become aware as that word is manifested during the day to say, oh, okay, that's part of God's presence. Here's God right before me.
I was conducting 3 simultaneous meetings. My office was full of people all needing different things. The phone was ringing. I was trying to print out something on the computer, and there were 3 different people standing there with their agenda, and I just started laughing. And I was reminded of that quote about Brother Lawrence, where he said that in his kitchen, amid all the clatter that was going on, he could be as much in the presence of God there as at the Blessed Sacrament. And the breath prayer enables me to do that. It's just a reminder that that God's there, and God has a sense of humor in the midst of the chaos.
There are 2 questions that people most commonly ask about the breath prayer. The first is, well, is the breath prayer supposed to take the place of all my other forms of prayer, such as my Bible study or my intercessory prayer time? No. The breath prayer is simply another way for us to be attentive to God's presence in our midst throughout all the activities of our life. And the second question is, well, does the breath prayer ever change? Yes, there are times when the breath prayer does change. As we continue to move more and more into an understanding of ourself and of our God and our relationships with others, there will be times when our prayer will change. But there was a writer in the 14th century who said, don't change your prayer often, lest it become like the plant you transplant from place to place to place and then expect it to grow.
I said, Father, let me feel your joy. That was my prayer. And I prayed that prayer for about 10 months. And then I was at a retreat, and I began praying, Father, radiate your love through me. And that was a helpful prayer because it works both ways, the love of God radiating through and radiating for me outwardly. And that was my prayer for about 10 years. And then a couple of years ago, I began to pray, Jesus, abide in me. And within just a few weeks, I began to notice a shift in the prayer, and it became, Jesus, keep me simple. And in reflecting back on that, it was during the time of a pastoral change, a work change, where I moved from a 400-member church to a 4,400-member church and became immersed in all kinds of administrative activity. And so I think that was an expression of what I deeply needed, and that was simplicity. And so Jesus, keep me simple, has been my prayer, and that is my anchor. It keeps me sane in the midst of the chaos of life.
At the moment, I pray a prayer that's been sort of a long time coming. It sounds simplistic, but it's simply make room for love. And it began with a prayer in which I was asking God over and over every day, set me free to love. The first thing that changed was set me free for love, because it occurred to me that I needed to be loved as well as to love other folks. The next thing that changed was to set me free, and I had this wonderful image one day of God saying, come, and I couldn't get there because I was loaded down with all these chains and heavy metal things, and I couldn't, and I was telling her, well, I can't come. I mean, it's obvious I can't come. I'm weighted down with all this, and I heard God say, stop picking them up. And I realized I'd already been set free, but I was picking up all this stuff, and it was so heavy, and it was only because I wanted to carry it with me that I couldn't come. So then, out of a series of meditations from that time grew this one day when I was in despair and thought there was no solution and no way out, and trying to figure out what book do I need to read, what course do I need to take, what wise person do I need to find. Give me an answer now, God. And the thing that came back was make room for love. That's it. I mean, that's it. That was exactly so. Just make room for love. Yeah. Yeah. A couple days later, I was going to a meeting with someone I really struggle with, have a hard time loving. And so I was saying, you know, help me make room for love, because this is hard work. It's a hard work. Mm-hmm. At which point it came back to me, I'm talking about my love, not your love, which is conditional, stingy, narrow, self-righteous, and on and on. I'm talking about my love. Yeah. And for me at the moment, that's the words that open me back up. Make room for love, and it's God's love.
So the breath prayer has been helpful for me and for many others as a way to be attentive to God's presence right where we are. Could it be that way for you as well? What is your breath prayer? Now, I know perhaps some of you might have said, well, it seems like I've used a breath prayer before, but I just didn't know it was called a breath prayer. That's very common. But what is your breath prayer? I suggest you take a minute of silence right now to discover your breath prayer, or to reaffirm a prayer that you've been praying. What do you normally call God? Or what is your image of God? And if God were right here in front of you, calling you by name and asking, what do you want? What would you say? What is your deepest yearning? Your breath prayer may come to you quickly, or you may want to reflect on it again later on. Let's take a minute now in silence and discover your breath prayer. After the minute, I'll return with a few questions that you may want to discuss. Let's begin our silence now. Here are two questions. Someone may want to write them down for reference. How do you respond to the possibility of praying in this way? When during the day could you remember to be aware of God's presence?